George Lynch. 2 seconds, 1 second. Kobe pump fake. Kobe for the win. Kobe Bryant.
1-2. He loops out to left field. Going to be a tough play. Jeter on the run. Makes the play. Wow. And flies into the stands. Oh, what a play by Derek Jeter.
Roethlisberger has time. Throws to the back of the end zone. And it is caught for a touchdown by Holmes.
This is the Personal Foul Podcast. I'm your host, Colton Gesser. We got a special guest coming on the show this week. Former 3-time All-American soccer player, ESPN, Fox Sports reporter, Renee Washington. Thank you for coming on, Renee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's been a pleasure to actually have you on. We talked a little bit on and off, finally able to hook up a podcast here, and pretty excited to get this one going.
Yes, same here. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to this also.
Yes, it's going to be a good time. You can find Renee on Twitter at Renee P. Wash. You can also find her podcast at Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington. Tell me us a little bit about that podcast that you have, or what it is about, so people can actually go and check your podcast out.
Yeah, for sure. So I launched it July of last year. So I'm actually coming up on my 1-year anniversary for it. And Beyond the Headlines is a concept of just taking stories a little bit deeper than what you read in the everyday major headlines, so to speak. So instead of just talking about trending topics, which we do get into also, but I try to go a little bit deeper with the interviews, with the storylines, the stories that I'm sharing, to give people a little bit more. You know, I think there are so much that we don't ever really get to discuss in terms of people's journeys and what they've overcome and things they're doing in their community. So for me, it's bringing sports, music, entertainment, news, all these different aspects to the forefront so we can get into some different types of conversations. And I try to make it so it's more dynamic and more than just what you would see if you turn on your TV and turn on ESPN or anything like that, but you're getting a deeper look into some topics that we don't maybe talk about as much, or maybe we do talk about, but I try to go a little bit deeper into it. So the concept is exactly what the name sounds like, and it airs every Wednesday on Fox Sports. And so I'm excited to see, you know, what year this has all been in 1 year. I'm excited to see what the next year will hold.
Absolutely. I've actually had the opportunity to check out a few, and they're actually very, very good. And as you touched on, I like that because you do not see that what's going on behind the scenes with a lot of these athletes and other stars, and whether it be entertainment, as you touched on, hip-hop, all the music, whatever it may be, you don't see all the behind the scenes. You'll hear only the negativity usually, nothing positive, sadly, with the news.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And there's so many great storylines out there, people that are doing incredible things that we just do not talk about enough. So that's where I try to bring, you know, shine a spotlight on things that we should be talking about or paying attention to more.
Absolutely. That's what kind of was frustrating with watching the draft this season, with this year's draft. I mean, they did a great job with everything virtual, but I feel like there was nothing positive about any of these players that were just getting drafted, which should be the most exciting time of their life. And I felt like you never had any positive things about it. I thought it was all negative, even like bad things about like their parents and stuff with these players, which I didn't think was fair to these guys.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I did have conversations about that after the draft aired. Like, they almost were trying too hard to discuss all that the players have overcome. And yeah, there are, of course, like some of the players have, whether it's having a child or having a sick relative or the passing of a loved one. I totally get that. But, you know, I think it gets to a point where it gets to be too much and you now become numb to it. And we're just oversaturated with the same types of stories that you get. Like, it just, after a while, I know even with the NFL draft, I was like, okay, enough. Like, enough already. So, yes, I feel like also because it was virtual, maybe they tried too hard to bring in the emotional factor, since normally we'd see the players hugging their families and, like, the emotions of that. You know, I think they tried a little too hard to go bring that same emotion that you get when it's in person.
Absolutely. That is a good take on it, and I honestly think that might be what they were going for. But let's hop into stuff that's going on right now in the world. Major problems. I wanted to ask you about it. Everything brought to light after George Floyd was murdered. So I just wanted to hear what comes from you, what your take is on everything, because I think we have some problems. A lot of the athletes are starting to speak up about it. What is your take on everything that's going on in the world? Because I think changes need to happen. The media, as we touched on, bad media, we're starting getting media attention for this because I think there's problems and nothing has been done about it. So I wanted to hear from you what your take is on everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's really a lot, and as a Black woman and also a journalist, I know there has been a lot of the question of, how much do you speak up? What do you say? How do you get involved? Where in this instance, looking at George Floyd's murder, even Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and looking at all that has not been done, it's like you have to speak up. You have to find ways to use your anger and the emotions that you're feeling to help be a part of the change. So for me, it's just, okay, how can I use my platforms, whether it's through my shows that I host, whether it's through social media, whatever it may be, how can I use my platforms to help be a part of change? So this has all been a lot. It's been a very emotionally draining few weeks, but something that I know I've always said to people is it's also exhausting being a Black woman and being a Black person in America in general. Like this feeling of discomfort and this feeling that so many people are feeling now, that's an everyday for people like me. So, it's time for change. And I think that by everyone being so uncomfortable and watching George Floyd's murder play out, watching him beg for his life, watching Breonna Taylor die, she was in her home after a long day of work in her home to then have bullets, and be riddled with bullets. Just all these things as a human, you just can't wrap your head around. That's someone's daughter, that's someone's father, that's someone's, cousin, brother, sister. So it's exhausting. It's emotional. I have to find times to disconnect and not pay attention to everything on social media and shut off my phone or the news or whatever it may be. And then find other times where I'm locked in, dialed in, trying to be a part of change. So it's mentally, for a lot of people right now, been a lot just to balance, to deal with all this, because it is scary. And unfortunately, even as we're seeing since George Floyd's death, there's been more that have happened in the midst of the protests and everything else. It really just makes you nervous and more scared knowing that it could be you. It could be your brother. It could be your sister. Like it could very well be in your very own family that this is happening. So that's the scary part about all this, because there's no prototype or anything. It's just right now with this, with the social injustice that's going on, it's being Black. So it makes you fear, especially as a Black person, for those that you love and care about the most. So I think beyond just all watching and being frustrated, watching our world, it's not even just our country. You see other countries that are protesting, watching our world up in arms right now. More than just that, it's also terrifying for your own family's safety and health. So I'm just hoping that this is a time that, it feels different. It feels like people have had enough. And I think that we're going to see a change, not right away. It's going to take time. These are centuries and centuries of discrimination and racial and different forms of racism that we are overcoming as a society. So it's just now being patient and continuing to persistently push the envelope.
Absolutely. And I think you said everything perfectly there. It is making people uncomfortable, and as they should be uncomfortable. If this is not making you uncomfortable, then there's a problem. There's real problems going on, and it's finally being brought to light, and hopefully we do see real changes, and hopefully we don't have this whole, it took 2 months, this whole issue we all talked about for 2 months, and that's it, and it gets tucked under the rug again like it has this whole time for centuries and decades, and through my parents, my grandparents, on and on. It goes on and on. And hopefully we get real change now. 2020 has been awful. Coronavirus, everything going on with the racial injustice. But now hopefully that is something positive to take out of all this going on. And hopefully we see some real change. And we just need some change. Something needs to happen. Enough with the slap on the wrist for these guys. These guys need to get punished if something is wrong and they're not following the rules of officers.
Yeah. And I tell you what, I really, really do hope that everybody that is involved in all these cases, because Breonna Taylor's, the cops that shot her still haven't been brought in. Like if this is not handled properly, if these police officers are not found guilty for murder, they murdered someone in all these cases, this is going to only get worse. So I really do hope that for the first time, and that's going to be, I think, as you talk about, Colton, the change that needs to happen is, we need to start holding everyone accountable, regardless what your career is. If you murder someone, it's murder. And so if this does get swept under the rug, like we've seen in the past, I don't know what's going to happen in the world. I'm scared to death. of what will happen. But I am just praying and hoping that this is properly taken care of. And it needs to be for every single police officer. If just one gets off with a slap on the wrist, oh goodness, because it's just, for so many people, we are just tired and frustrated and scared. Like that's what a lot of people don't realize. A lot of this is also fear. You're protesting out of fear of your own life. So when you get to the point that people are like backed against the wall and don't know what to do, it's fight or flight. And that's the fear of all this. So I'm hoping that we at least have the justice system work and do what is right.
Absolutely. Kind of staying on the same topic, not so much we're hopping into sports now, but Kyrie Irving spoke out very, very surprisingly in a players-only meeting, or a players-only conference they had. 80 players were involved. Kyrie Irving spoke out to a lot of them and said that this is not the right time to be going back and playing basketball. Everything that's going on in the world, this needs to be the topic. Basketball is not something that should be on our minds right now when we have racial injustice like it is going on in the world today, and that big of a problem as it is. Do you think Kyrie's comments were wrong, or do you think they might be just misinterpreted? Something that Kyrie should have maybe adjusted, maybe something that he should have adjusted, knowing that the NBA is going back. Because I get Kyrie's pockets are filled with money. Kyrie might not need this money, but a lot of NBA other players might need the money to support their families. And also in the process, they're able to use the platform that they're going to get down in Orlando. Figure not going to have the fans. It's going to be just players and the media. The players are going to be able to say whatever they want about everything that's going on in the world today. So what are your thoughts on Kyrie's comments? Not saying that they're wrong or anything, because I think they're right, because there is a lot of problems that we just talked about that need to get changed. And Kyrie is bringing that to light, saying that is more important, which it is, than sports. Because this has been going on for, as we just talked on, it's been going on for our whole lives, plus some. So, I mean, stuff needs to change. So what are your thoughts on Kyrie's comments?
Yeah, and, I was actually watching the ESPN special Monday night, so yesterday, and they were talking with different commissioners, Adam Silver being one of them. They brought Damian Lillard on from the NBA. They were talking with Roger Goodell and the WNBA commissioner. And so in those conversations, they literally brought this up. And Damian Lillard actually had a really good point that he was making. It's just that right now there's so much going on in the world that it is hard to focus on basketball. Like, there's so many layers to this that makes this so difficult. So I understand on one side why this is an opportunity, as you say, with everyone being tuned in, everyone's going to be watching the NBA. So now you have that platform in the interviews, in the warm-ups, whatever you're wearing for warm-ups, if you're taking a knee, whatever it is, you have all eyes on you. But then also what a lot of players are saying is, okay, but we're also actively a part of the protest. Like, how do we step away from our communities where we've been actively protesting ourselves to now go play basketball? Or how do we mentally get away from the fact that we've dealt with so much between COVID and now Black Lives Matter? It's hard to even focus on playing basketball. So there's a lot of concerns there. Of course, there's the actual health concern that they might be rushing back, and the protocols they have in place might not really be enough to keep everybody safe. But then there's also the emotional and mental concerns around, are they even going to be able to actually focus on playoffs right now, or finishing out the regular season to get a good seed in the playoffs right now, given the fact that, especially with having a predominantly Black league, these are players that are fighting for change in our world. So Kyrie Irving's comments also about the fact that, and this I do totally understand with, you're going to have all these players, predominantly Black players, in the midst of a civil rights movement, knowing that the league is already losing out on a lot of revenue, having them down in Orlando on a stage, in a sense, performing and entertaining the world because everyone is upset that we don't have any sort of normalcy. Meanwhile, where are the owners? Where's the front office? Where are the people who are behind the scenes, which, as we know, are predominantly white, that are behind the scenes in the power players off the court, at home with their families? So for that reason, it is kind of a sense like it could be frowned upon that in the midst of a civil rights movement, to bring all these Black players and almost say, like, here, we need entertainment, go play basketball. No, like these players want to be out, like Dame Lillard was saying. He was out protesting also. Like they want to be out in the communities. But then on the other side of it, not only do they make money for their families, they also are making money for their communities. There are a lot of people that do benefit and that they do, pay, whether it's through their nonprofit work and charity work, whatever it may be, through the money they make as a player. So there's so many layers to this that it's almost like impossible to see which is just right or wrong. I fully understand both sides of it. I fully understand why it's on one end a good chance to use this platform to speak up. And then on the other end, you could be almost perpetuating the issue more by stepping away from what's the major issue of the Black Lives Matter and civil rights movement to go play basketball. So I have no idea how this is going to play out. I know we all want sports. It just, for me, my biggest thing is I want sports to come back safely when it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved all the points there. It's just, it's crazy to think LeBron James spoke on it, said he's going to play basketball. I don't know if Pat Beverly took a shot at LeBron James, but the king has spoken. We're going to play basketball. So figure the biggest name in basketball, the king, spoke and said they're going to go play basketball, either way you slice it. So what do you think with LeBron James coming out and saying that they're playing?
I'm a huge LeBron James fan. If anybody knows me, I am Team LeBron all day. So I do, when LeBron James spoke up, there were people that were frustrated because LeBron James wasn't a part of the meeting. And my whole thought process was, he is his own individual. He has a right to speak up. And in his case, he's ready to get back to playing basketball, not only because the Lakers potentially could have won the championship this year, but also I think LeBron, much like a lot of other players, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, there were a lot of players, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, that were not in that meeting, that are big names. Like for as notable as Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Kyrie, Kyle Lowry, all these players are that were there were a lot more that were not there that even have a bigger name and a bigger platform in a sense. So I think that also that's something to look into. Like, look at the names of the players that were there. Look at what teams they're coming from. Look at the names of the players that were not there, and I'm not going to say it's all about championships, because I do think that it's convenient that a lot of players that were not there are also on teams that are potentially going to win a championship. But I will also say that if those major players, more importantly, LeBron, Kawhi, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, if the major name players want to play, I'm not going to say there's favoritism, but the league has already made it clear that they have other players that they would bring in, G League players, whatever it is, to fill out those rosters. So they have already said if a player adamantly does not want to play, we support them. We won't hold it against them, but we're going to basically put someone in their place and we're going to keep the show going. So there is the potential that the players that don't want to play, anyone that was on Kyrie's Zoom call that decides they really don't want to play, okay, that's fine. Go ahead and we respect that, but we're going to go on and finish out the season. So I think if I actually agree with Patrick Beverly, which is not always the case, I rarely do. If LeBron James wants to play, I'm sorry, the NBA is going to play. That's like if this is in the 90s and Michael Jordan steps up and it's like, I'm playing, you better believe the NBA is playing. So it does revolve a lot around him. He's the league's golden child right now.
Absolutely. LeBron is the golden child. As a Lakers fan, I'm hoping they get a chip at the end of this. But that's a great point that you did bring up there, though, that a lot of these title contending players were not in this Zoom call. So it's very easy for Kyrie Irving to speak on this, who's out for the rest of the season with the shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
And the Brooklyn Nets, no offense, without Kevin Durant and Kyrie, they're not going to be winning a title this year. So it's very easy to talk like that, because I think it's going to be very interesting once these guys go down to Orlando. As you touched on, the biggest stage, pretty much all sports are going to be on the NBA with no baseball. That's a mess what's going on with baseball. Lord have mercy with baseball.
Oh, yes.
Blowing this opportunity here. NHL going to be coming right back right around the same time as the NBA. But the NBA is going to be the big, big star of the sports world, and they're going to have everyone watching. Even if you didn't watch NBA, I guarantee they'll be watching. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the president has to say and what the players do down in Orlando.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a great point you bring up with baseball, too, being a mess right now. But I think even like what the call was on the ESPN special is just that nothing really is finalized. there's all these anticipated dates and hopefuls and things like that. We're not really sure because also, like, I just heard news that there's a second wave of COVID that broke out in China. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are. I haven't looked into it yet. But, we also have no idea what's going to happen around the pandemic with all these protests and even the fact that businesses are opening up and people are back on the beach and back out at salons and stuff. Like, we have no idea what the next few weeks are going to hold. So although the leagues are trying to do all they can in all sports, soccer, basketball, baseball, hockey, all of the leagues on the men's and women's side are trying to find ways to safely return. We really don't know. We have no idea. I honestly didn't think we were going to have any sports this summer. I thought the summer was going to allow us to get back to, like, the beaches and stuff outside because outdoors, as we have been told, safer to an extent. But I didn't expect sports to come back this year. I thought that maybe in December, January, we would start back up. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'd love to have them back, of course. It's weird in this time. Like, we would be watching sports more than ever. But I don't know. There's so much unknown, right? There's just so many things we don't know.
Absolutely, and it's crazy. NASCAR doing a great job so far. They got fans in the seats this weekend in Miami. Figure a lot of fans weren't in the stands though because of all the thunderstorm and rain delays that they had going on during the race. But figure that went well. NASCAR's had it done for a few weeks now. They're doing A-OK. Their big drivers are safe. No one has COVID. So we'll see how it pans out. Definitely with all these teams down in Orlando. But we'll get into the NBA and what to expect going on here through July with them starting up the end of July. Who do we see making a big push? Does this help the Lakers having LeBron James, the veteran old LeBron James, with this much time off to rest his body, and hearing that he was having private workouts with teammates, so it's not like the team is out of shape. We saw Danny Green pictures during when he was protesting. He looks in good shape still. So a lot of these guys still in good shape. Who do you think this advantage goes for, especially with the Lakers and the Bucks not getting home court, knowing that there's no fans in the stands?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is right now everyone is – we just don't know what they're going to look like. Everyone has been working out on their own, yes, but it's not the same as what you would have if this were – the playoffs had picked up right at the end of the regular season. We didn't have a 3-month gap. That's a lot of time where you're just out of routine and you are maybe still working out on your own, but it's not game shape. It's not game-like workouts because you weren't able to work out with other people. You weren't able to play, even pick up and things like that. So having the 8 games or 9 games that teams are able to play before the start of the playoffs will at least allow them some time to get back into the swing of things. But I would not be surprised if some teams, maybe like the Heat out of the East or I don't know who out of the West. The West seems pretty wide open still anyways. But the Heat out of the East is a team that, to me, will be able to benefit from having this time off. So, like, I think there are going to be some teams that maybe catch people by surprise. Everyone is going to be shaky. Everybody's going to be a little rusty coming back. Everyone at least will have had the opportunity to heal. Forget load management at this point. You've rested. There's no need to rest anymore. But it will be – the biggest concern is injuries and things like that because everyone has not been playing. So to just jump back into playing full steam ahead, like they almost needed a preseason before they fully got back. And I know that teams are reporting to train the first week of July, but you're training early July, then the games are starting a couple weeks later. That's not a lot of time, given the fact that you have not played the last few months. So, I have no idea. I have always felt like, and you said this too, like as a Lakers fan, as a LeBron fan, I felt like this was our year. So I'm just hoping, like, please, let this all work out because this was, in my opinion, I already had LeBron winning another ring this year. And this was one of the most frustrating things about when the season was put on pause because I was like, now we don't know if we're going to even have a season for them to win. So I don't know. It's going to be odd. I feel like it's going to be like watching, if you've ever watched like pickup games at the park where everyone's at the beginning just a little bit rusty and then by the end they got a little, their things are clicking again and stuff. So I'm looking forward to it again. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Absolutely. There's a lot of teams that benefited from this, as you touched on. LeBron James and the Lakers, especially LeBron. Figure Giannis got hurt right as this coronavirus took over. So the Lakers could have taken advantage of that with Giannis being out of the lineup because at least 2 weeks he got hurt in the Lakers game. So I figure the Lakers could have easily hopped into the number 1 overall seed in the NBA. Figure that now that favors the Bucks again. Now Giannis is going to be healthy. Philadelphia is going to be healthy with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons back now. It's definitely hit and miss. Figure with the Clippers also. Paul George healthy now. Kawhi, load management. He's going to be good to go now. Figure the rest of the way you got to figure. So this is going to benefit a lot of teams, or it could hurt a lot of teams. As you touched on with Miami, you could see them being good. I don't know. There's a lot of young players in Miami. So you don't know. Again, they got Jimmy Butler there, who's an alpha, who might have been on these guys the whole time to stay in shape and work out. But you don't know. There's a lot of young players, Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn, Duncan Robinson. A lot of these guys could have been taking it easy, just hanging inside during this whole quarantine, and might have put on a few extra pounds. So
yeah, that's the other thing.
So
Quarantine 15 is real.
Absolutely. So we really don't know what a lot of these players are going to look like. Figured Joel, we all make fun of Joel for having a bad work ethic. This might have been bad for Joel, or it could have been really, really good for Joel. So we're going to really find out here coming up in the next month or so, but definitely going to be crazy.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be very, very – that's the thing. Like, this is either a time where players are able to kind of get ahead and catch up in a sense, or fall farther behind. We have no idea, like, how much people have really been working out. We know a lot of people have been eating a lot, binge watching a lot of TV shows. So it's definitely going to be interesting. But as you mentioned, like, players like Paul George and even Kemba Walker and different names from both sides of, you know, the East and the West have had the opportunity to heal at least. So we do know that's going to play a factor in this too, because going into the playoffs a little bit beat up and run down versus having a few months off, that's completely different. You know, it's a completely different routine that you're getting into. But
what are your overall projections going down to the end of the season here for the NBA? So we got the NBA doing everything in their power to get Zion Williamson into the conversation in the playoffs. Dame Lillard, as you touched on earlier, and the Blazers, Dame was not going to play unless given a legitimate chance to make the playoffs. Now he has that chance. So to wrap up the podcast here, what are your overall takes for the end of the season here for the NBA? Do you see Zion sneaking in the 8? I think the biggest team that got hosed out of this whole thing was the Memphis Grizzlies. And it's by a landslide. I think Memphis got hosed. I think Memphis is probably not making the playoffs now, which is also a disadvantage for the Lakers, might I add. The Lakers are going to have the Grizzlies in the first round. Now they're going to probably have a very, very tough matchup with either the Blazers or the Pelicans. So what's your take on the end of the season here?
So I'm actually going to stick with my original postseason predictions. Way back before the pandemic even paused the season and you know, we've had all this waiting period, I actually had the Lakers and the Celtics in the finals. And I'm still sticking with the Lakers. I'm Team LeBron, so I got to go with the Lakers. And I don't know that the Clippers, Rockets, Portland, I just don't know that these teams, although very good, I'm still sticking with LeBron and the Lakers. He's had months to recover. I know if anybody's been working and having incredible workouts, it's LeBron. So I'm sure LeBron and the Lakers will be ready to go. Out of the East, the only other team besides the Bucks that I really, really feel like could come out of the East, I think everyone wants to say the Bucks because of Giannis, but the Celtics. Aside from the Celtics, everyone wants to say the Bucks because of Giannis. But I just feel like Toronto actually is a team that has a lot to prove. You know, everyone immediately wrote them off once Kawhi left, and now has had them as a team that was going to struggle. We saw Pascal Siakam throughout the regular season show us otherwise. They still have Kyle Lowry. They still have Marc Gasol. They still have a lot of those same championship pieces. So if the Celtics do not come out of the East, I think it will be the Raptors before the Bucks, actually. But I think Kemba, Jason Tatum, you know, looking at the Celtics roster, the depth they have, the incredible coaching and Brad Stevens, I've said from the beginning, and I'm sticking with it, it's the Lakers, Celtics, finals. The Lakers win it all. I have no idea who else gets to the conference finals, but that's my predictions for the finals. And I'm sticking by it.
I would love the finals. It'd be great for the NBA. And Lord, it'd be great as a Laker fan to see them win and LeBron to get another chip. But Renee, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And who wouldn't love to see a Celtics-Lakers finals again, like we did in the 90s, right? So, yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I enjoyed talking through sports and everything that's going on in society around civil rights movement. And I appreciate what you do too.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You can find Renee on Twitter at Renee P. Wash. You can also find her podcast at the Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington on Fox Sports Radio. Thank you again, Renee, for your time.
Thank you for having me.